One of the most interesting technologies in Hyper-V is a Hyper-V replica. This is natively built into Hyper-V, and it's a mechanism that allows you to replicate virtual machines. It will replicate asynchronously from a primary site to a secondary site. Now, the advantage of this, you have continuity and recovery capability. So if there's any type of outage, if there's a site failure, you can simply use the VM in your replica site and your users can still access data, you can still deliver services. In my example here, I have a primary site and I have two Hyper-V hosts, P1, P2, and I have this SMB file share just as central storage. Then I have a SharePoint VM, SQL, CRM, Exchange, and AiAzure. So I have 5 virtual machines total, just spread across 2 hosts. Then I have a replica site on the other side of a WAN link. Here I have 3 Hyper-V hosts, R1, R2, R3. On R1, I have an Exchange and my CRM VM. Then R2, I have my IIS VM, and R3 has the other 2, SQL and SharePoint. Now, you replicate an individual VM. If I did not have a need for my SharePoint VM to replicate, maybe I didn't want it to replicate, then you simply would not replicate it. This is a per virtual machine setting, not a host setting. That's why I have this diagram that has 2 hosts in the primary and 3 hosts in the replica site. So you handpick which VMs replicate, and you also pick the destination they replicate to. So your replica site does truly not have to mirror the primary site. Just decide what VMs you want to replicate. And they replicate across a WAN link on a schedule that I choose. So we can have this replicate every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes. We can define the interval for the replication itself. Now this is pretty straightforward to set up since all the components are natively built in. But we can manage this using the Hyper-V interface, just the Hyper-V Manager tool. You can also manage this through PowerShell. We have several commandlets that we could use in PowerShell that allow us to manage Hyper-V. So that runs on both sides, whether it's PowerShell or the user interface. You use that on either side. There's also a Hyper-V management module that tracks and replicates changes. So all that happens, you perform your initial replication. After your initial replication, this management module just tracks changes that occurred since the last replication. Whatever your replication interval actually is, it then just replicates those changes. So across your WAN link, you just send that replication traffic to the servers in your replica site. Now the replica machines are powered off. So if I take this Exchange VM, that's powered off in the replica site. It's on in the primary site. So it can only be powered on in one site at a time. But what can happen, I can have some type of failure here, and what I can do is select the failover, and this will power off if it's not already off, and this one automatically powers on. When it powers on, I can define the IP address that I want to give it, and what it will do is actually update its name and IP address in DNS. Now, it's going to have the same name. So if this is Exchange 01, the replica is going to be named Exchange 01. I just define the IP address, and then it goes to DNS and says, DNS, I'm letting you know I'm Exchange 01. This is the IP address, and that record is automatically updated. So now when any clients connect to Exchange 01, they would simply connect to the one on your replica site, but you would still be online and you can still deliver services. When your primary site, whatever your issue was, is resolved, you can simply fail back. When you do that, any changes that occurred on the replica servers, like those virtual machines, would simply replicate back to your primary. Then your primary server, that VM would turn on, the replica would turn off, and then you're back to running everything out of your primary site. So a very easy way with no additional cost, not a big configuration, pretty straightforward to achieve high availability for your virtual machines in Hyper-V.